The movie tells the story of a 6-year-old boy named Sergei, who lives with his mother in a small Russian village. At that time, German troops were aggressively invading Russia, and Sergei's father and older brother had died in battle. After the summer of 1942, a devastating battle between Germany and Russia was known as the Battle of Stalingrad. At that time, German troops arrived and massacred the villagers. Seeing the arrival of the German soldiers, Sergei's mother panicked and immediately told her son to escape through the window. Unfortunately, he was shot by Nazi soldiers and died. Terrified and desperate, Sergei ran into the forest without knowing where to go. He cried, only able to think of his dead mother. With no clear destination in mind, he kept walking further and further into the forest. After wandering around the forest for a day, Sergei finally found a stream. Immediately, he drank the water to quench his thirst. Suddenly, he saw a group of German soldiers passing by. Fear immediately gripped him, and he rushed to hide behind a tree. Hungry, Sergei could only hope that the Nazi soldiers would leave some leftovers that he could use. Not long after, the Nazi soldiers left. They were so hurried that they didn't have time to finish their food. Seeing this opportunity, Sergei immediately took the food they left behind to fill his long empty stomach. Day after day, Sergei wandered alone in the forest. He kept walking, leaving a trail so he wouldn't get lost. To survive, he ate wild fruits and drank water from the morning dewdrops on the leaves. Suddenly, however, a missile fell right behind him. The powerful explosion knocked him down and almost knocked him out. In his weakened state, Sergei kept trying to walk despite his body weakening from hunger. Just then, it started to rain. He gulped down raindrops to quench his thirst, but it wasn't enough to restore his strength. Finally, his body couldn't take it anymore, and he collapsed in the middle of the forest. Russian soldiers eventually found Sergei on patrol. They immediately took him to a troop camp for treatment. Upon arrival, the soldiers treated him and fed him, realizing that Sergei was one of the victims of the Nazi massacre. Sergei was then taken to the camp for further treatment. The camp also served as the headquarters of the Russian army, defending its area from German forces. There, Sergei was cared for by a beautiful woman named Katya. With great affection, Katya always encouraged Sergei to stay cheerful and not get lost in sadness. Every day, Sergei saw soldiers wounded or even killed in battle. The sight made him want to help them. Katya never tired of reminding Sergei to be tough and strong in the face of any problems that came his way. A few days later, the man who had found Sergei, Commander Kuznetsov, had come to see him. Sergei told Kuznetsov everything he had experienced, from the massacre of his village by Nazi soldiers to the death of his mother and brother. Hearing the sad story, Kuznetsov wanted to raise Sergei's spirits. He then showed Sergei his best pistol, hoping to boost his courage. Apart from Kuznetsov, other Russian soldiers would often visit Sergei and give him small gifts as a show of support. Sergei's spirit was slowly restored, and a strong patriotism grew. One day, German troops came back to attack the Russian forces. However, with their strength and determination, the Russian forces managed to repulse the German troops. After the battle, Commander Kuznetsov returned to see Sergei. During their time together, Sergei had come to think of Kuznetsov as his father, as he had never felt a father's love. Seeing this closeness, Kuznetsov decided to adopt Sergei and give him the love he had been missing. Kuznetsov also gave Sergei a gift, an army uniform. Sergei looked very happy and loved it. However, his happiness didn't last long. Suddenly, German troops attacked unexpectedly, causing many Russian soldiers to die in the attack. Seeing this, Sergei panicked. He searched for Commander Kuznetsov and Katya, but in the chaos, a nurse reminded Sergei to take care of himself and always be ready to help anyone in need. These words lifted Sergei's spirits. He began to venture out to help the wounded soldiers as best he could, trying to provide support amidst the destruction around him. After the incident, Commander Kuznetsov took Sergei for a walk. However, when they arrived at the telecommunications center, they saw that the explosion had destroyed it, which meant they could no longer communicate over long distances. Seeing the situation, Sergei eagerly offered to be a courier or messenger to keep the communication going. Surprised by Sergei's courage and spirit, Kuznetsov was in awe and finally allowed him to do so. This made Sergei even more cheerful. The other soldiers were also surprised to see him so energized. Sergei walked along the trench, handing out letters with orders from Commander Kuznetsov. Sergei's arrival, with his enthusiasm, brought joy to the soldiers. They were delighted, and the tense atmosphere began to melt away, thanks to the courage and cheerfulness of a little boy who wasn't afraid to face adversity. One day, Sergei was traveling alone through the forest with binoculars. Suddenly, he was surprised to see infiltrating German troops monitoring Russian troops behind a haystack. Quickly, Sergei rushed to report his findings to the soldiers in the camp. At first, the soldiers didn't believe him and thought his report was a joke, so they only sent a few soldiers to check. However, Sergei's report turned out to be true. They captured several German spies and secured an essential telecommunications device. Sergei's courage in reporting the findings greatly impacted the Russian troops. The next day, the Germans attacked again with more and stronger troops. The attacks came relentlessly, causing chaos in the Russian ranks. As a result of the enemy's attacks, Sergei was slightly hampered in delivering his letters. One of the soldiers who saw the situation immediately warned him that things were getting dangerous for Sergei. Given the approaching and growing threat, the soldier told Sergei to return to the camp immediately for his safety. Back at the camp, it was noticed that Commander Kuznetsov and his men could not communicate because the telecommunication cable was cut. This left the Russian troops, led by Kuznetsov, cornered by enemy attacks. Upon hearing this, Sergei immediately rushed to the battlefield to search for the downed cable. With the help of directions from a wounded soldier, Sergei managed to find and reconnect the broken telecommunications cable. Thanks to Sergei's persistent efforts, communication between the Russian troops was finally reconnected, bringing relief and hope to the soldiers caught in the battle. The following day, after the battle, the soldiers went on patrol to check the residents' condition. Sergei also played with his new friends, feeling happy after a night of tension. However, on their way home, they were suddenly attacked again by German soldiers. Commander Kuznetsov and Sergei survived the attack, but their village was now in ruins. Seeing the devastation before his eyes, Kuznetsov felt things would only worsen. He knew full well that the Germans were a stubborn and ruthless army that would not stop until they had destroyed everything. Later that night, the enemy suddenly returned with a fierce attack. The attack was so intense that it caused trees and buildings to collapse. In the chaos, Commander Kuznetsov was knocked down and crushed by a log. Seeing this, Sergei immediately tried to move the massive logs but could not due to his limited strength. In a panic, Sergei reported the incident to some nearby soldiers. Luckily, thanks to the cooperation and quick response of the other soldiers, Commander Kuznetsov was saved. Although wounded, he survived the attack, thanks to Sergei's bravery. Long story short, the day came when the war ultimately ended. The Germans were rumored to have retreated from Stalingrad, and Sergei was rewarded for his heroic actions. With the region safe and peaceful, the Russian troops returned to camp, and Sergei went to live with Commandant Kuznetsov. Sergei grows up, and despite his young age, his fighting spirit never dies. And with that, the movie ends.